Hi. Remember me? I know it's been a long time. Anyway, this is Edward, and welcome to More Geek Than Gay.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Wimpy whoopy, tiny whiny stuff.
Okay, so, oh my god, I can't believe how fat my face looks right now, but that's a whole other thing. Whole bunch of things been going on. Into the new house, done with the old house, got everything into storage, out of storage. Joseph's been sick, I've been hired, and I had to do my mandatory 10s, and trying to get everything all set up back with school again. And then there's also the whole thing with the technical difficulties, because still can't find the tech box, and that's actually added to the whole delay on everything because all my equipment is still in storage. And that's why you're getting this podcast via phone again, which I kind of didn't want to do anymore. But lo and behold, ta-da, here it is again by phone. And okay, we are actually going to do our best to find that box of tech stuff, because we're going to do an official relaunch of this podcast on my birthday, which, okay, there's a cat in my face. Why are you in my face, girl? How come if I blow on you, you don't go away? Okay, good girl. Okay, but December 3rd, that's my birthday. Official relaunch of the episode, of the podcast, I hope. And hopefully we will have all the tech equipment all done. Until then, you're going to get these kind of weird little episodes that I'm not even going to number. I'm not even going to number these episodes. I'm going to letter them to set them apart. Yeah. So that's kind of a quick little rundown of... Why is she licking me? Why are you licking me, cat? Screech. Screech. Hi. Okay. Well, see, now you got cat hair on my nose. Or maybe it's my own mustache hair. I don't know. So, anyway. Big deal going on tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Doctor Who 50th anniversary special. Yay! And it's going out live, so we can all watch it at the same time, all around the world. Yay! And I'll be honest, I can't wait for it. Okay? I'm going to watch it live. I'm definitely going to watch it live. I don't need any of the pre-show stuff. I don't think I'm going to watch any of the pre-show stuff. But I will, I probably will watch some of the pre-show stuff if I can, but that's not a goal. If I miss some pre-show stuff, I don't care. But we're going to watch the Doctor Who 50th anniversary special thing live. Not because I'm afraid of spoilers, but because I'm flipping impatient. I've been looking all around the web for whatever spoilers I could find, just because I'm that impatient. But I haven't found any good, definite spoilers. So, I figured this would be a good time to actually cover some Doctor Who stuff. Okay? Now, this way you kind of get yourself a nice little primer for leading yourself into the 50th anniversary special. Now, interesting enough, I think a lot of people coming into Doctor Who are actually only familiar with the show from the time that it restarted on the BBC. So you're familiar with Doctors 9, 10, 11, which, well, more on that later. Eccleston, Tennant, and Smith. The trick is there's been 8 Doctors before that. Or else, how else would they get a 50th anniversary show out of it? Now, the first Doctor was kind of a grumpy grandpa doctor. Okay? And my brain just shut right down here. Oh, I cannot stop scratching my nose. I do not know why. But the first Doctor was played by, so you get to see parts of the new townhouse. Those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening are probably wondering what's going on. The first Doctor was played by William Hartnell. Okay, came across as a kind of a grumpy grandfather. He was taking care of his granddaughter Susan and 2 of her teachers at school just kind of noticed that she was a little bit different than the other students, and so they decided they wanted to visit her at home. Discovered they were living in basically a junkyard in in a police box. That's what they saw her go into. They follow her in. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. The Doctor goes, oh my God, kidnaps the teachers and for discovering that he and his granddaughter are living in their vehicle in a junkyard, and adventure ensues for 50 years. That's pretty much the big thing there. Now, when you're looking for Doctors, well, like I said, he was where it all started. The show was still intended as a kid's show. I believe it's still listed as a kid's show under BBC programming, even though it's not necessarily like, Bananas and Pajamas, but at the same time, or Teletubbies, but I believe it is still listed as a kid's show. As such, the Doctor was intended to be kind of a kindly older mentor type of character who would help along with different types of stories. They would alternate between historical stories and then science stories or future stories. This continued on for quite a while. The only part that was weird on this is the fact that the kindly old mentor was actually a cantankerous old grumpy man who, like I said, had a tendency of kidnapping people. The best adventures, I think, for him, I think actually his adventures hold up very, very well. And I made a small list so I wouldn't forget anything. The best adventures for the first Doctor, ideally, would be, first of all, you'd want to start with the first adventures. BBC did release a box set of the very first adventures called In the Beginning, or The Beginning, and it contains Unearthly Child, which is where we get to be introduced to everyone, and it's kind of a standalone, and then whoosh, 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 whoosh. That's my bad TARDIS noise. We lead ourselves straight into the next adventure. Okay, they didn't have titles really for the storylines at this point. It was just one big long continuous serial. But it is basically considered it is listed by the BBC that the next adventure is called The Daleks. And this is where we get introduced to the Daleks. Then after that, we have The Edge of Destruction, which is just another story. Hard to describe. It's just another story with kind of cave people-y type things, but it doesn't seem like a good historical, if you ask me. these are a great place to start. Well, at least Unearthly Child and the Daleks is. Okay, even Edge of Destruction, can take it or leave it as far as I'm concerned. But I think that Unearthly Child and Edge and the Daleks actually hold up really well. The production standards for having a children's show budget, they did their best. And a lot of that goes to the director, who I cannot remember the name of, but he was with them at the very beginning, and he left after about the fifth or sixth episode. But these episodes really hold up. You can see where the appeal of the Daleks started from the very beginning. They're somewhat menacing, even though they're very limited in their scope in this first adventure. You can kind of tell that they probably were intended as a one-off villain that we'd never see ever again. Much like the future Weeping Angels, but the Daleks was fantastic that they figured out a way for us to see them again and again, and they became great villains as compared to the Weeping Angels, which became just kind of a running joke of ridiculousness as we saw them again and again. But that's just my opinion, which we'll get to a little bit later. There is also a historical that's available. There's a lot of his adventures are still available on DVD. A historical called The Aztecs. It's exactly what it sounds like. They're going back in time to the Aztec period and really introduces the idea that time cannot be interfered with, even though clearly even he starts interfering with time here and there. A little bit of moral ambiguity in that story. Not too horribly, but still a little bit. And you get some strong female characterization out of it. So it's actually another really good episode. It's the one that the BBC decided to show during their anniversary countdown, even though I would have figured they would have shown the Daleks, because why wouldn't you just start from the very flippin' beginning? Really, BBC? That's how you're going to play this? So, that's the first Doctor. Eventually, William Hartnell's health was starting to become an issue. And, pardon me, and they decided to retire him from the show. It was a mutual decision. But, what do you do when the lead character is going to retire? Well, fortunately, he's an alien, and they decided, well, maybe something alien can happen to him. And so an accident happens, and with the help of the TARDIS, he ends up regenerating into a new Doctor. This Doctor, and I was going to come up with an entirely wrong name. This Doctor was played by Patrick Troughton, obviously a little younger than the previous Doctor. Also, not as much of a cantankerous granddad, more of almost a clown that you could underestimate very easily, who liked to play the flute. First case of a Doctor with a bow tie. I do believe there might be a time when he wore a fez even. I don't know. But when you get to this Doctor, two real good standout episodes. You have The Tomb of the Cybermen, which I believe is when we first see the Cybermen. Not 100% positive on that one, but it actually has some really good atmosphere to it. The plotting on it is pretty good, because that is an issue with some of these older episodes, is they were done as a serial. So if you watch them all at once, they kind of start dragging because there's too much stuff, because they kind of have to rehash a little bit of the previous episode and fill it out to 6 episodes. This one does not have a lot of filler. It actually is very well paced. And again, we have another Doctor Who classic villain early on. We got the Cybermen. Yay! The other good episode is War Games, where This is where the Doctor ends up. This is the last adventure of the Third Doctor. He had decided that it was time for him to move on, and it was time for them to figure out how they were going to handle this thing again about switching Doctors. In War Games, though, it's kind of a longer episode, well done, pastiche of different time zones being brought together to play war against each other. And this is where we finally get to find out that the Doctor is Gallifreyan, he's on the run, and all this stuff. I mean, we kind of knew he was on the run, but we didn't know the extent of what was going on. And I bet you've been staring at the top of my head for part of this because I've been lazy about where my camera at work is. This is what happens when you're using your phone. So, this episode we get to find out more about. This is really the first time we get to actually start finding out stuff about the Doctor's history. He ends up going against another Time Lord and kind of calls upon the Time Lords for help in doing this, or contemplates doing it. It's been a while since I've seen it. I do remember being really impressed. Again, well-paced, does not seem stretched out. The time periods flow really nicely back and forth with each other. Good episode. So that would be the other one to see if you could only see two of this one. Now, the BBC had an interesting history with their original programming, and that is, once a show was aired, they kind of felt that it was done. So they would store some of it, but there's many things that they just wiped because, well, it was already aired. They kind of viewed themselves as televised theater. And so, many early shows, there's episodes missing because they just don't exist anymore. The BBC just wiped them out of existence. And this happened with the classic adventure detective type story, The Avengers. It's happened with many of their early comedies. It happened with Doctor Who. Patrick Troughton, most of his stories are incomplete because there's just chunks of episodes missing. Tomb of the Cybermen, 2 of the episodes are missing. They had to reconstruct them using audio tapes they were able to find, and then created flash animation, which was pretty good. And so there's not a lot of the Second Doctor for you to be able to find, sadly. They did just unearth some more tapes. They have a tendency of finding them, because they would send copies to like India or whatever. So while the originals are gone, they'll sometimes find that copies are sitting on the shelves in these foreign studios. They just unearthed an interview with the first Doctor, Hartnell, by that very same thing. The BBC original tapes were wiped, but the studio where it was recorded at happened to have a copy of them sitting on their shelves. And so they're including that on a release of DVDs, is a rare Hartnell interview. They just recently found some more sound footage and a couple more video footages for Patrick Troughton. So they're releasing a couple more of his, but again, they're going to be filling that in with flash video. What you going to do? It's really interesting seeing flash video in black and white because they kept it in black and white to keep the feel of the show. Black and white. The world doesn't stay in black and white, though. We move on to color. Yay! Oh, great. Start recording, then cough. That's the way to do this. I just wanted to take a quick little drink there. And I figured breaking into color would be the ideal time. So, like I said, we break into color because we have the technology now. And we get a new Doctor at the same time. Patrick Troughton is called back to Gallifrey, and then the Doctor is dumped unceremoniously onto Earth as basically his prison punishment, where he is forced into being a new person by the Gallifreyans, played by Jon Pertwee. We now are on our third Doctor. This Doctor sticks around for 5 years, where the previous two only did about 3 years each. Jon Pertwee is a gray-haired dandy of a man filled with adventure, doing Venusian kung fu at every turn, and running around in his car Bessie, and basically trying to get the hell off Earth, because, while he likes the planet, he doesn't want to be stuck here. We get a lot of Earthbound adventures here. This is also the time when we get introduced to the Master for the first time, played by a good friend of Jon Pertwee's. I can't remember his first name, but it was Delgado. They planned out a whole season-long storyline, basically, of rivalry between him and the Master. Unfortunately, Delgado died before the very end of it, and things had to be rewritten at the last minute. Also, this is where we get introduced formally to UNIT, the military organization that pops up many times during Doctor Who, especially with his extraterrestrial things or whatever, as they appear on Earth. This is where we get introduced to Jo Grant, who does pop up later and gets mentioned once or twice. And we, of course, get introduced to the lovely companion, Sarah Jane, who is a reporter, spunky, decides to come along, and ends up being the Doctor's new companion, all the way through the end of his 5th year. Not that she started with him, Jo was earlier, but we do get Sarah for, I want to say, like the last half of the 5th Doctor, or 3rd Doctor. He was dressed in kind of an opera-type uniform, opera coat, ruffles, very formal, dandy, not a funny man. And, his adventures were basically, while they were really good, they were also very typical. Alien comes to the planet, there's something that happens, we run them off, adventure. Carnival of Monsters is a nice rare exception to this. He did eventually get to where he could leave the planet eventually, and he got to go on adventures, and Carnival of Monsters is one of those, I believe, with Sarah Jane, and it's quirky. It's here we start seeing the beginning of the slip of special effects, partially because you couldn't hide it in black and white. You couldn't hide it in too cheap of a budget. With the first 2 Doctors, they didn't try for anything super fancy because they didn't have the budget to try for anything super fancy. Well, now special effects, the price of the special effects had gone down, the cost had gone down enough that they started trying to do things that just don't work well. And they become glaringly not working well, again, in color. But the stories are really good. So if you're willing to deal with plastic monsters that don't cast shadows because they're clearly not in the same room as the people that it's interacting with, you got yourself some good adventures with these. That's what Carnival of Monsters is. It's a very good story. Actually, you'll find yourself laughing at the right times. Everything. The story and the writing aged well, in my opinion. Just pay no mind to the special effects because, wow. Also, another story that comes up here, which is relevant to now, is we have the three doctors. They decide to reunite the first three doctors all together. This is the first time we've had the doctors run into each other, because they weren't supposed to be able to see each other. You're not supposed to run into each other in your own timeline. But there's a big crisis, and Gallifrey, the council, decides that the doctor's the only one that could help them, but it's too big of an issue for the doctor, so they need the doctors. You get a lot of Troughton and Pertwee running around, and Troughton more of a buffoon, more of a clown, Pertwee more of a proper dandy, no nonsense. Hartnell's health had deteriorated to the point where he couldn't actively participate in the episode. He ended up being seen just on a video monitor giving advice to his other two selves throughout the rest of the episode. Other than that, still a good episode. Fairly strong. The writing is still holding up really well during the Pertwee season. Like I said, it's just the decision to have it be he stays on Earth and has an Earth adventure every week just makes it to where there's less to comment on. But they're good, solid stories. Pertwee sticks around for 5 years, eventually regenerates into Doctor Number 4, Tom Baker. This is the doctor that most Americans were first aware of. The guy with the floppy hat and the curly hair and the big long scarf. He would play the doctor for 7 years. Okay? This is freakishly weird. But he played the doctor for 7 years. It's even hard to keep up with how many companions he had. He did have Sarah Jane for a while. Dropped her off in the wrong city, which she refers to later when you see her later in the series. He gets kind of a, what do you want to call her, like a savage beast woman type thing named Leela. Not to be confused with the one-eyed green or purple-haired mutant from Futurama. And he also gets another Time Lord who is assigned to him to help him with the Keys of Time story, which is a season-long storyline where he has to try to gather the Keys of Time for the Time Lords so that no one else can get them because they're just too dangerous. And he ends up with a new Time Lord named Romana, who at the end of that, the actress who played Romana decided not to continue on, but they still wanted to keep Romana around, and so she regenerated into a new Time Lord, and so we had two Romanas. And the second one played by Lalla Ward. The fourth Doctor played by Tom Baker. Lalla Ward and Tom Baker became romantically involved, and this started becoming very obvious on the screen. And while the Doctor was never written to be having a romance, it is very easy to see a romance going between these two characters. And the writers, while they were under orders that they could not involve the Doctor romantically in anything, they let it play as it could. Romana eventually ends up in another dimension called E-Space, and while in E-Space, the Doctor picks up a companion that many people absolutely hate because he was an annoying little kid named Adric. I liked Adric. He was fine. I like the fact that he was a different type of character, an annoying kid who always wanted to prove himself to the Doctor, and not spoiled but needy, a very Jan Brady kid. There are companions and others that I have missed during this whole thing. It was 7 years. He stuck around. During his tenure, though, the production staff changed. And you can see kind of more of a slick look start occurring about halfway through the series, or halfway through his Doctor. The Doctor's coat even changes from being just a kind of a shabby brown to a really sharp burgundy. It's interesting that very few people mention that, but many people did not like this new era of Doctor because they found it to be too slick. Personally, I have no problem with it. The show just changed. Later, we'll see where the problems arise. For the fourth Doctor, many people find him to be their favorite Doctor. Even people who are familiar with the new show, when they get involved with the fourth Doctor, they love him the best. Me, I actually kind of almost find him the weakest now. Just because I don't know, maybe its familiarity has bred contempt for me. He's the most alien Doctor up to this point. Just a little bit odd, always offering a jelly baby. And he just doesn't seem quite, I don't know. He just doesn't seem as personable to me. Although he was very likable and very charming. Played by Tom Baker. How could he not be? The City of Death, with his companion Romana, is a great episode. It takes place in Paris, and it has a wonderful little plot about forged paintings. Believe it or not. The Doctor gets involved in a stupid plot about forged paintings. And it is actually, in my opinion, one of the best episodes of his run. Another episode that people really like, but in my opinion, wholeheartedly typifies the problem with production standards and the amount of money they had and what they decided to try to do anyway, is The Talents of Wang Cheng? I don't remember how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's a little bit racist. It involves Leela as a barbarian who has a great moment where she appears to want to stab things rather than actually try to talk her way through things. Love that. That's actually a great Leela moment. Introduces two side characters, I believe it's a police officer and a detective, who later kind of end up taking on a life of their own. And it involves also a small little alien, a homunculi or something, that is played by Deep. Oh, I cannot remember his name, but it's the guy who ended up playing all of the Oompa Loompas in the remake of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it's not a bad episode, but there are parts where you're supposed to be like going, ooh, where you will laugh out loud at the horrible special effects. They would have been better off just leaving things suggested off the side or something. It is horrible, horrible, horrible moments of special effects in this. He, at the end of the E-Space story, where he loses Romana and gains Adric, he ends up regenerating. Okay? He picks up another companion along the line and ends up regenerating and becomes the fifth Doctor, played by Peter Davison, who does appear again in a little short episode during the 10th Doctor's series. Peter Davison had previously been on All Creatures Big and Small, playing a country vet. And he was the youngest Doctor up to that moment. And his was more of I always refer to him as the Lonely Doctor, more of just a thoughtful Doctor who seemed to realize that he couldn't win everything. He always kept companions around. He's the one that traveled with the most companions at one time. Sorry about that. I had to plug my phone in because was using up all its go-go juice. He's the one that traveled with the most companions at any one time. Okay, I believe he was up to like 4 different companions for a little while. His companions never seemed to change their clothes. They had more like uniforms. He wore a cricket uniform outfit with a stalk of celery. Okay, so we've gone from a grandfather to a guy playing a flute to a dandy in an opera ruffle shirt to a tramp with or an alien or whatever with a big long scarf to now a cricketer with celery. Why celery? Well, we get to why celery about the third season in with him. But like I said, this is a quiet Doctor, a very quiet Doctor, a definite departure from the previous Doctor. The previous Doctor was alien. This guy is all too human. And I think he's the one that suffers the most of all the Doctors. He feels everything that's been lost along the way, and he feels everything that he's going to lose as he continues on. And I've always kind of likened that to why he travels with so many companions. There's 2 very standout episodes or storylines for him, and that is Earthshock. Earthshock is where we get rid of Adric. Adric decides he wants to go back to E-Space. Well, you can't go back to E-Space. Well, Adric has figured out some calculations that make it to where maybe he can. Can we give it a try? Meanwhile, the Cybermen are around. It involves a time travel story, going back in time when Earth's past. Adric comes up with, like I said, his calculations. But unfortunately, Adric dies right before the end of the episode, completely crushing the Doctor, who had realized that he'd been kind of ignoring Adric a little bit. This kid who was a needy kid who had been taken away from everything he ever knew, and he basically needed the Doctor to be a surrogate father. Well, the Doctor never really realized that. He always treated him as just any other companion, and so it's only now that the Doctor really realizes, oh shit, and he realizes too late. The episode doesn't end with the cue music or anything like that. It's one of the few times that you don't get the theme music at the end. It ends very somberly. Then another standout episode would be I'm going to get this one wrong. I mispronounce all these Doctor Who episodes. I'll just tell you right now. The Caves of Adrazani. Caves of Adrazani? I don't know. This one commonly listed amongst as like in the top 5 episodes ever. That includes all Doctor Who episodes. Oddly enough, it didn't stick with me. There were some really nice touches. You could see things were going on. I really liked how it started, but it didn't stick with me. It's one I'll admit I have to go back and revisit. But people cannot stop praising it highly enough. So many different sources that I definitely have to say this is the one. And Peter Davison had even said, because he had already decided to leave the show by now, he said that if they had gotten more scripts like the case of Androzani, I don't know. If they got more scripts like this earlier on, he would have been willing to stick around. But at the end of this storyline is when he regenerates into the next Doctor. The last words he says is Adric, because that's his biggest loss. Like I said, this is a Doctor who is all about loss. Boyish optimism, carrying a whole bunch of loss. We now get to the sixth Doctor, played by Colin Baker, which for a long time caused a whole bunch of confusion because the fourth Doctor was Tom Baker and the sixth Doctor was Colin Baker, and then you'd oh, I like the Baker Doctor. Which Baker Doctor? I don't know which Baker Doctor. I like the first Baker Doctor. Oh, okay. This Doctor, arrogant, egotistical, condescending, and dressed in the brightest outfit you've ever seen outside of La Croix. People hated this Doctor. Now, personally, I think that people hated this Doctor because you really can see the inferiority of the scripts around this time. I don't think it actually has to do with the fact that the Doctor was less likable. I love this Doctor. I love the fact that he's less likable. It's about time that we got a Doctor who just wasn't the same, I'm going to be a nice guy. This is a Doctor who would openly mock his companions if they said something that he just deemed stupid. But the scripts were just so... not good scripts. Okay? Which is a shame, because and this is the Doctor who was fired. Okay? Colin Baker was fired even after he had appeared on another show explaining what they were going to be doing in the upcoming season. He was let go. Formatting changes happened. The show was already struggling. I truly think that they were looking for an excuse, and they decided to blame Colin Baker for the fact that the show was having issues before anyway, okay? The writing, they messed with the format, changing, instead of like just serial, it became two-parter episodes of 45 minutes each. It just didn't work. Lots of things didn't work. Here you start seeing that schmarmy smoothness that people complained about during the Tom Baker when it changed over. You didn't see that so much during the Peter Davison. You saw it all over the place here with the Colin Baker Doctor, Doctor 6. Hui. But you got Vengeance on Varos. Vengeance on Varos is actually a really good episode. Capitalism, a little bit hit you over the head with it, but at the same time, the point sticks around. It's well plotted, well scripted. The pacing fits just right. You're introduced to a character named Syl, who was played by Nabil Shaban. I'm sure I pronounced his last name incorrectly. He recreates this character Syl later on, but the thing that makes it interesting is the fact that he was, he was a dwarf, I believe, but he was, if I recall correctly, I'd have to look at the pictures again real carefully, but I believe he was actually basically from the hips upward. He was lacking legs, or something along those lines. But he played the character Syl so beautifully. No one else could ever touch this character. Even though it was a silly little slug character, you believed he could be a smarmy businessman that could potentially be a threat, who also kept like really hunky bodyguards to carry him around. really, really kind of, well, the Colin Baker episodes also seem to have a certain gay mentality in their direction. We have the Mark of the Ronnie. This introduces another rival Time Lord that was intended to become a big deal, called the Ronnie. She's not evil so much as she's amoral. She just cares about scientific endeavors, and she doesn't care if people have to die for her to get there. Okay, so what? The information was worth it. So if she kills off a planet, whatever. The Ronnie was played by Kate O'Mara. Okay, here's where we start getting the gay sensibilities again. Kate O'Mara is dragalicious. Okay? She was on Dynasty playing Alexis's conniving sister, and she was on AbFab playing Patsy's conniving sister. Two shows that have a great gay following. And if you see the Ronnie as she operates with her bohunks underneath essentially a bathhouse where she can get her victims, although it's not a sexy bathhouse in any way, shape, or form, unfortunately. But if you see this, you will definitely understand why. This is some of the gayest moments in Doctor Who, even before we start having gay characters, openly gay characters. But we have the introduction of Syl, we have the introduction of the Ronnie, we have the two Doctors, which brings Colin Baker together with Doctor number 2, Patrick Troughton. The story is incomprehensible. Okay? But it is so obvious that this Doctor that Patrick Troughton's Doctor has aged, that it has led many to suppose that when he was called back to Gallifrey, the Gallifreyan Council decided to use him on some sort of secret missions, and hence the term Season 6B, which would take place right before Doctor 5, or the third Doctor kicked in. When we start dealing with all these numbers, it gets all confusing. Now, previously during the Peter Davison era, we did have a reunion episode, The Five Doctors. Unfortunately, Hartnell had already died, so they had to get a replacement to play him. And Tom Baker refused to be it as part of it, and so they had to use clips of an unfinished story and claim that he was trapped in time. So you really only got kind of 3.5 Doctors. Okay? But it was still great. You got to see a whole bunch of old companions. Then we finally get to the two Doctors here. This is the last of the reunions that we'll see for a long time. But it does lead to a fan favorite idea of Season 6B, which there has even been a novel that was written by someone who contributed to many Doctor Who stories. A novel that leads straight into the idea of Season 6B. It basically validates it. So if you're willing to buy that the novels are canon, which there's a lot of debate on that, and it depends on which novel we're talking about. If you buy that, then there is a Season 6B that was introduced because of that episode. Then we also have Trial of the Time Lord. Okay? All that stuff happened in the first season. First season with this Doctor. Second season, Trial of the Time Lord, we have the Doctor being put on trial for crimes against time. And the Time Lords have brought him together, brought him back to Gallifrey, he's on trial. Fairly good episodes all the way around. Honestly not bad. The writing has improved considerably for this. But it introduces the character of the Valeyard while he's on trial. The Valeyard is referenced in the later episode, The Name of the Doctor. The Doctor, when they're trying to figure out the name of the Doctor, he will eventually, in the future, be known as the Valeyard. The Valeyard is the bad guy. The Valeyard is like an evil incarnation of the Doctor towards the end of his regenerations. He's the one that's putting himself on trial to try to cover up all the things that he's manipulated in the timeline, basically. Oh, my light just went out. Oh, that sucks. I don't know what to do light-wise, man. Especially since I don't have a lot of light right here. Let me entertain you. Let me find some light. And we got light over here. And probably more cats. So, but the Valeyard, I believe, was intended to come back. But we have never seen him again. But he does get referenced again. Another idea that is introduced during the Sixth Doctor's tenure. The Sixth Doctor is fired. He's even fired before he gets a chance to film a regeneration. They have him bump his head, he falls over, and he regenerates into the Seventh Doctor. The Seventh, and I believe this is the first time that they actually really refer to it as a regeneration. So it's not just some sort of thing that possibly happens, where before there was always a plot contrivance. Now it's definitely, this is something that happens. Although it does get referred to before because the Master is referred to as having run out of regenerations. Meow. Hello, Pustulina. So, this Doctor is played by Sylvester McCoy. And he took a while to grow on me, just because he talks very differently. His Doctor is back to being kind of a friendly buffoon, but much more manipulative and conniving. Just not obvious about it, but he's cool. But if you follow along, you can see, oh, he is playing along and pulling all sorts of strings. Oh, sorry for that brief interruption. Now, where was I? Manipulative. The Seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, had inherited the companion Mel, because, again, they hadn't planned on this Doctor yet. That he was supposed to still be the Sixth Doctor, but they fired him. This becomes significant because there's no real good explanation for how the Eighth Doctor met Mel, given the fact that, or how the Seventh Doctor met Mel, given the fact that Mel was supposed to be met in the future of the Sixth Doctor. So, not sure they ever fully really explained that. The Ronnie makes another appearance, her second and essentially last appearance, unless you count a children's special. And here's where we start seeing we just start seeing the cracks in the wall. We know that the show is going to end around here. Again, no fault of the people involved. Sylvester McCoy actually plays a great Doctor. Different flavor than the previous. It's just the writing and the production has just really fallen horribly. We acquire the companion Ace, who many people love. I hate Ace. I don't know why, I just do. She annoys me. The best stories for the Seventh Doctor, though, is Paradise Towers, kind of a hotel type thing. on an alien thing. You get to see the Doctor pulling strings there, which is very interesting. You get to really see the manipulations that he does to everybody around. And then, as I scratch my arm, there we go, Remembrance of the Daleks, which is an interesting episode because it was done for the 25th anniversary of the show, and it takes us all the way back to him arriving at that same junkyard and the Daleks being there. Ace is Ace, but she's not too bad. She actually just comes across as a normal kid in this one. It doesn't bother me so much. Unfortunately, the show doesn't last many episodes past this. Oh, this is also where you get to see Daleks fly. You get to find out how Daleks go upstairs, which, if I recall correctly, was kind of alluded to before, but you actually get to see them do it in Remembrance of the Daleks. Ha! The show goes on for a couple more episodes, ends with Survivor, goes on hiatus for a while, which this time when it went on hiatus it meant it was canceled. Then finally we come to an agreement between BBC and Fox Studios in America where they will produce a new Doctor Who show, and they're going to link it into the original production. Just to prove that they're going to do that, they have Sylvester McCoy come back as the seventh Doctor, and he ends up getting shot and regenerating into the eighth Doctor soon after landing on Earth. People hate this movie. It was done as a pilot movie. It was supposed to lead to a new show. People hate this one. I don't think that's fair. First of all, it was a pilot. Which meant it was kind of trying to do too much, yet at the same time, it did it in a movie which it just drags. If they had compressed everything or added a lot more running around, I don't think people would have noticed anything, because there's other episodes that are pretty bad that people like. There's other shows and movies that are pretty bad that people like. I'm looking at you, Star Trek, Edge of Darkness, or whatever it's called. Horrible movie. Makes no sense. But since this was the first appearance of the Doctor, people wanted it to be perfect. It was played by Paul McGann, who did a great job. And that's really the one big thing that you can praise about this one. Everything else is weak. Admittedly, very weak. But again, it was meant as just a pilot, as unfortunately a 2-hour-long movie pilot for the new series. If it had continued on to a series, I think we would have seen a lot of those weaknesses fixed. Fox didn't care for the ratings. It was a shared effort between Fox and the BBC. So since Fox didn't care for the ratings, since they didn't really push it, they didn't pick it up. It didn't go anywhere. This was the only appearance of the Eighth Doctor until just recently for the 50th anniversary special, where they came up with the 6-minute short Night of the Doctor, which shows the Eighth Doctor regenerating. So he'd been around for a little while, and I would love to see a little mini-series, even if it was just webisodes, of the Eighth Doctor going about his business, and then leading up to the Great Time War. Even though this Doctor only appeared once, a lot of people really liked Paul McGann's take on him, and he possibly is the Doctor with the most books and audio tapes, or audio adventures and comic strips and all that done. He has a couple other companions. There's with one of the companions, we have a mention of the future, or a hint of the future time war to come against an unknown assailant. They don't specify it's Daleks at this time. And I think that in the 6-minute short, he mentions her name right before he regenerates. I'm not sure. But again, nothing happens. It goes away. We come back years later with the new Doctor Who, brought to us for a year by Christopher Eccleston. Now, everybody acts all surprised that he only stuck around for a year. I could have sworn that when they announced that he was coming on, that they knew he was only sticking around for a year. That's all he wanted to do. So, I wasn't surprised at all when he regenerated at the end of his season. He was a great introduction character. Unfortunately, it also meant that we were introduced to Rose. I hate Rose. I loathe Rose. I love Billie Piper. Billie Piper is fantastic. I just hate Rose. Great episode for this Doctor would be the two-parter that takes place in World War II. I can't remember the name of the first part, but the second part is called The Doctor Dances or something like that. It introduces us to Captain Jack. And it introduces us to, it also reminds us of how really war-torn this Doctor is, and how eventually he decides, no, nobody dies today. Later, the season finale, which is another two-parter, is another great episode for him. The first half is fantastic. The second half, it really falls apart, although, again, we get the Doctor like going, no, I'm not playing this war game anymore. We're going to play by my rules, and nobody's going to die, except for maybe some of you Daleks. And also, it is significant because in the second half, we get to see every character that we had seen previously brought back just to do their part in the show, and that's a forewarning of what we're going to see every season finale for Doctor Who from now on. Is we're going to have a clusterfuck of every character that you possibly remembered coming back and having some big adventure, whether they really fit in it or not, just so you can see them, and then they're going to go away again. It's truly epic in its triteness, but that's how they decided to handle their season finales now. At the end of the first season, he ends up regenerating into David Tennant, many times referred to as Dr. Ten. And this is an incredibly popular Doctor, rivaling the Tom Baker Doctor in popularity. A lot of good episodes with David Tennant. But I think really the best episodes revolve around he and Rose. It's just, you really have, not he and Rose, sorry, he and his later companion, Donna, played by Catherine Tate. Finally, we get away from any sort of romantic involvement, and it becomes a matter of the Doctor going around with a companion. Martha, I love her, but she pined for the Doctor when he didn't care for her back that way. Rose had been pining for him, and he'd been pining for her, and matter of fact, Donna's really the only companion in the new series who there's been no chance of a romantic interest in. Okay, from either direction. And it's so nice to see that come back, and I hope that they eventually bring that back, because I'm tired of the romantic angle with the Doctor. It's like, oh, screw that. He went 25 years without a romantic angle other than possibly another Time Lord, and now everybody wants in his pants. Fine. But that's neither here nor there. The Donna episodes are really good. When we lose Donna, it's heartbreaking. There's also a two-part episode where the Doctor, or actually a one, I think it's just a one, but it all the parts segue into the finale. These I do not remember the name of the episodes. I wish I could. Where he and Martha, his second companion, end up going back in time, and he has to kind of become human to try to hide for a while, and she has to keep an eye on him. I personally think of that as a incredibly defining moment for Martha, because to do so she has to play his servant, and it's just an incredible role and an incredible story. And you this is the first time we see, well, not the first, I don't think it's the first time, but we see more hints of him referring to the previous 8 Doctors, including Doctor number 8 that we've only seen that one time. He eventually ends up regenerating. Waters of Mars, great story. Great story. That's towards the end of the David Tennant series. Fantastic story. You start seeing a bit of desperation in a Time Lord at this moment, and it's really kind of refreshing. He ends it in possibly the most whiny way a Doctor has ever regenerated. It's like, oh, good Lord, just regenerate already. And he becomes the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, the youngest Doctor, who actually ends up playing it kind of very old, surprisingly, at the same time. Ends up with, we get, in the David Tennant stories, we did get the library, the one with the library, which I can't remember the name of, which introduces the character Riversong, who becomes an incredibly important character, whether you like it or not. But that episode is a great episode. And then we also get the episode Blink, which introduces the Weeping Angels, which are a fantastic one-off monster. And it's a great episode. Unfortunately, they just decide to bring the Angels back for no good reason. But not during Tennant. We wait until a new producer comes on, and we get Matt Smith. Matt Smith ends up traveling around. They run into, again, Riversong, who just becomes just almost so annoyingly Mary Sue that it's not even funny. Even though I don't think she was a Mary Sue. I think she was just badly written. Again, great actress, just badly written. And we get the return of the Weeping Angels, who now have proven, who were fantastic as a one-time scary monster, and now are just a recurring monster of like, wow, you're incredibly pointless, and make no logical sense. That doesn't mean that the Matt Smith episodes don't have any good ones, though. He acquires companions Amy and Rory, who are getting who actually end up getting married and having a baby while on the TARDIS. And there's an episode where they have, I want to say it's called the Dream Master, and they keep alternating between 2 different realities, one on the TARDIS and one in her hometown, and they have to decide which one's real. That's actually an excellent episode. Another one that I really liked happened towards the end of his run, written by Neil Gaiman, who also wrote Sandman, and he had written another episode of Doctor Who prior to this, and it involved the Cybermen, and it is the most Doctor Who episode I think I've seen in this entire reproduction of Doctor Who. It reminds me the most of the original series in all the right ways. It's clever, it's got Cybermen, it even brings back the mention of gold, which no one remembers that being a Cyberman weakness. It's a fantastic episode. It leads to the nearly pointless Name of the Doctor episode, but what are you going to do? But one good thing about the Name of the Doctor episode, which takes us towards the end of the Matt Smith run, is that the Name of the Doctor introduces us to another Doctor, the one who broke the promise. Well, as I said before, Dr. 8 had only appeared once, up until recently. In a 6-minute short, we get to see him regenerate into another Doctor, but not Doctor number 9, Eccleston. We get to see him regenerate into someone else we hadn't seen before, except for in the Name of the Doctor, and this is the War Doctor. So Dr. 9 is actually Dr. 10, Dr. 10 is actually Dr. 11, Dr. 11 is actually Dr. 12, but that's a whole renumbering thing that I'm not sure anyone's going to stick with. And that leads us up to the anniversary special. Okay, we have the War Doctor who comes who falls in between where we started with Doctor Who and where we left with the movie. Here's a couple little things. I would personally love to see, and okay, this was a big surprise. No one thought that McGann was going to come back to do anything. Not because he was unwilling, just because they didn't think it was happening. They thought it was just going to be Matt Smith and David Tennant doing the 50th anniversary special. But now we have McGann doing that lead-in. I know that Eccleston has said that he would never come back to do Doctor Who again. But this is a different production team, and this is a very special moment, and this is something I would love to see happen that I doubt is going to happen, but this is my dream, and that is sometimes towards the end of the anniversary episode, we get to see the War Doctor regenerate into Eccleston, and then Eccleston go on his way. And that way we get, he doesn't have to be on screen for long. He can just be on screen long enough to make us happy and to make the story make sense. We're also going to be saying goodbye to Matt Smith very soon. Not in this special, but in the one following it, the winter special. And we've already been introduced to the Doctor following him, the 12th Doctor, who's actually the 13th Doctor, which would make him somewhere possibly towards the Valeyard, except for now the Doctors don't have just 13 lives, so we don't know where this all falls. But that's a whole other story. And that is the skinny on 50 years of Doctor Who. Now, I could go into other things, such as the books, the comic strips, the audio stories. There's a metamorph penguin named Frobisher, who appears in the comic strips, but he's also now finally appeared in a couple of the audio things, and he seems like he's possibly becoming, of all the things that aren't TV, he might be becoming canon. I don't know. There's also 2 movies that were made starring Peter Cushing as Doctor Who that have nothing to do with with the series, except for the fact that they use 2 of the stories. But he's not Gallifreyan, it's not his granddaughter. I mean, it's a whole separate thing that were very well done and made for big movies, but they're also much more definitely juvenile. There's so much more. But you've got very little time to watch this before the 50th anniversary special airs. So I will call this an evening right now, and I'm going to try to bombard you with as many of these little mini, whatever you want to call them. Well, this one's not so many, but as many of these episodes as possible before we do the relaunch again on December 3rd. I do want to thank Joshua Tree Feeding Program. They've been just great guys. They helped us move, as a matter of fact, because we've helped them. And they help people with HIV and AIDS get food. So if you would like, and they're a volunteer organization, so if you would like to find out more about them, check out www.jtfp.org. Any assistance that you give will be they'll be more than happy about. And I'm going to say hi to Kim, and I'm going to say hi to Jenny, and I'm going to say hi to Stewie Monster, and I'm going to say hi to SJ, because we've got ourselves another fan out there. And we have another fan out there who we just discovered entirely on accident when Joseph was at a thing with Jenny, who said, "Oh, hey, I've watched this thing," and so I want to say hi to this person who I don't know who it is, but hopefully she's still listening, watching, or whatever, and will enjoy it, and maybe even let us know who she is. So hi, and Marcy and Jordan, and all you others, you know who you are. You're right there before the Professor and Marianne. So until the next time, which will hopefully be really soon, or else I won't be able to get that many of these out before the relaunch, huh? December 3rd is right around the corner. I will catch you later. Bye.